Americans, do you want universal health care? Why not? I'm sitting in my house with a torn something in my knee, probably lie still bleeding based on the spreading bruise, waiting 2 weeks for some lackey to decide that I'm worthy of an MRI because I can't talk to an ortho without an MRI because rules. Also, I can pay for the ER visit, MRI and probably most of the PT out of my own pocket, which will set me back years financially. Yeah, I want health insurance I can go use when I actually need and not worry about it ruining me. Give me all of that goodness. Edit. I should add that I have insurance. I have a kid and my deductible is like $6,000. So I may as well not have insurance. My daughter had a fever abroad in France. We debated frantically if we should take her to the doctor because we didn't know how our insurance would cover it. We thought the worst and that it was COVID. The doctor did a full exam for €30. We were expecting a huge bill after. Nothing ever came. Yeah, the healthcare system in the USA is utter corporatized filth. Burn it to the ground. I'm sitting in my house with a torn something in my knee, probably lie still bleeding based on the spreading bruise, waiting 2 weeks for some lackey to decide that I'm worthy of an MRI because I can't talk to an ortho without an MRI because rules. Also, I can pay for the ER visit, MRI and probably most of the PT out of my own pocket, which will set me back years financially. Yeah, I want health insurance I can go use when I actually need and not worry about it ruining me. Give me all of that goodness. Edit. I should add that I have insurance. I have a kid and my deductible is like $6,000. So I may as well not have insurance. I was in a similar situation a couple of months ago. Long story short, I had to go to 2 doctors. The first one did not want to do an MRI till the next visit in 2 weeks. Probably to get more money out of my insurance. The second one ordered MRI right away. Still had to pay about $500 out of pocket even though I have pretty decent insurance. They scheduled me another appointment so he could go over the results, which would have taken about 5 minutes through a phone conversation. But yeah, you guessed it, they wanted to get more money out of my insurance. Had to pay deductibles for all this shit BTW. DR ordered physical therapy, which I ended up skipping it because I would have had to pay 50% out of pocket. I have plenty more fucked up us healthcare system stories. I don't give a shit what anyone says, healthcare should not be a business. If you have a passport and are vaccinated, get the book to Mexico. Your insurance might offer a reduced deducible. Utah has even asked state employees to get the medicine in Mexico due to lower cost. Hospitals are set up in Tijuana and other border cities, solely for us medial tourism. Mexico costs about a quarter to half of the US costs, or even less if you go deeper into the mainland. Monterrey in Mexico City is cheaper than Tijuana. Confirmed that UT state employees are literally encouraged to fly to Canada and Mexico. I also have family members that regularly trek up north for antidepressants because the prices on basic drugs in this country are suicide-worthy. It's time to stop wasting lives with voting and start smacking dollars out of politicians like the ineptitudes that they are. The lives of my family are worth far more than theirs, and so are yours. Stop turning the other cheek just to die of preventable maladies. Same shit I'm going through on 2 fronts. 1. My hands are constantly going numb and tingly on me and my sternum pops when I lift my shoulder. Can see ortho. 2nd, have had upper left quadrant pain for 6 months and rectal pain. Cannot get to colonoscopy because I'm too young. Still paying a shitload cause I've gone to the doctor 5 times in the last 6 months trying to get these issues taken care of. I fucking hate us healthcare. My gastro doctor's youngest patient to die from colon cancer was a 16-year-old girl. If you can't get the doctor to diagnose your issues, go to the ER, they will find out what is going on. My dad died of colon cancer. He went to his regular doctor but she thought he had pulled a muscle. A little over 2 weeks later he drove himself to the ER at 6 a.m. and by 10 a.m. after a CT scan we knew he had a large mass in his abdomen, and the next day we found out he had colon cancer. With the symptoms you are experiencing, go to the ER? You can't get to colonoscopy because you're too young? What kind of bullshit is that? I had a colonoscopy when I was 31 and another when I was 35. Neither one of them were my idea. The first one was because I had a fistula and the second one was due to some concerning rectal bleeding that just turned out to be big fat internal hemorrhoids. I feel so bad for Americans, man. One of my best friends lives in NY State and I worry about her if she were ever to break her leg or something. Comma. I don't want to change providers every time I change jobs. I also don't want to prop up an insurance industry worth billions of dollars. So, yeah. Insurance in the US is usually tied to a job. If it's offered, it's usually too expensive to just pay for insurance yourself. So you get whatever insurance the job offers. Problem: every insurance company has a million plans and there's countless insurance companies too. Each plan supports different doctors. They specifically have a system where a doctor may or may not be approved for certain plans. Sometimes Doc John is approved, sometimes he's not. Sometimes Doc Steve is approved, sometimes not. Sometimes both. Sometimes neither. This is all highly variable. If you go to a doctor who is not covered, you either get vastly reduced coverage or no coverage at all, and have to pay largely or completely out of pocket. Most people don't have the money to deal with the lack of coverage. So if you're at Job A with Insurance A Plan A, you go to Doc A because that's the one who is available to you. Switch to Job B because of a better offer or because you lost the old job or whatever. Now you're on Insurance B Plan B and Doc B, because you can't afford to go to Doc A anymore because he's not covered. Switch to Job C, Insurance C, Plan C. Maybe you get lucky and one of the previous doctors is available. Probably not though. Our system up here definitely isn't perfect, but yeah, I've never paid for a thing besides ordering food because I didn't feel like hospital meals. It's fairly remote where I live and when I busted my arm I had a cab to the airport and a medevac flight to Winnipeg to get screws and plates put in 3 nights in the hospital, then got put on a commercial flight home, and out of all that my only expense was $35 for a baggage fee. It really blows me away how people can be against healthcare. Yes. We are living in a corrupt government, one where the politicians are being paid to do nothing for the citizens. Any chance of reform will be struck down, and as much as I'd love to see it happen, it most certainly won't. Forget healthcare, what about climate change? The USA is doing virtually nothing to try and change the corporation's behavior to pollution. https://www.followthemoni.org/ It makes sense as the corporations give billions of dollars to politicians to make sure it stays that way. Do not be fooled by the illusion of democracy, for that will be your downfall. We only have a certain amount of time to spread the word en masse, to try and reach the public before it's too late. We are nearing the tipping point, and nobody seems to care. Well, I care, and I hope you do too. Because I want to grow up in a world where I will be happy to contribute to my country, where I could raise a child and have my own business. A society in which nobody is afraid that they will go into debt. Please, check out my movement if you are interested in contributing. Our Citizens United USA. United we stand, or together we fall. I had a pretty well-paid job making sure the health system I worked for got reimbursed by health plans 100,000% support universal healthcare. I have an arsenal of stories on how truly fucked up the healthcare system here is, but here's one that has stuck with me. Reviewing a high-dollar chemotherapy claim that was unpaid with my team. Ask them to pull the EOB, explanation of benefits, that essentially outlines how the health plan paid what they did or why they didn't pay. The health plan had marked the entire amount, over $200K, as patient responsibility, meaning they were telling us to bill the patient for it. I personally called my counterpart at the health plan because it seemed like a mistake. Nope, turned out the patient exhausted their benefits, meaning they essentially ran out of coverage per the terms of their health insurance policy. This was a PPO plan the patient had through work. In other words, this patient, who is now fighting for their life and still in the middle of a cancer battle, is going to get saddled with a 6-figure medical bill despite doing everything right by getting good coverage through a good job. Quite frankly, if the cancer didn't kill them, the stress of figuring out how to pay that would have. This same health plan had an insanely ritzy office and so many perks for their executives it was beyond belief, yet held non-profit status. Made me sick to my stomach. I left healthcare. Edit to add. As someone who has seen the inner workings of the financial side of healthcare in the US, I can say with 100% confidence that there is no good reason someone shouldn't support universal healthcare unless you own a ludicrous amount of health plan stock or at the executive level of a health plan. Please bear in mind, Though many countries that have universal healthcare still have private options, so you weren't entirely without choice. This happened to me, except it was for a bone marrow transplant. My oncologist said that every day mattered with this very aggressive cancer, but the BMT team wouldn't begin until the money was accounted for. I was delayed about 6 weeks, enough time for the disease to progress to my liver. I had several complications, including a stroke. I was 25, and I have lasting disability from treatment. Every day I wonder if those 6 weeks would have made a difference. When my mother was dying, she was receiving treatment at the hospital she worked at. She was previously a nurse for 25 years, but had moved to billing 5 years earlier. The insurance company tried to tell the hospital what they would or wouldn't cover for my mother, a decades-long hospital employee receiving treatment in their own hospital. Her colleagues told us not to worry about it, and the talks about what was and wasn't covered never happened around us again. I often think how it would have gone if she hadn't been their employee and hadn't worked in the department she worked at and hadn't been getting treatment in their hospital. It's so fucked. At the end, after she died, we got a bill for $1.98 million, but our portion was supposed to be $900. We just threw it away. Hey assholes, she's dead. Go shake the change out of her corpse if you want it badly. The whole system is a mess. I find this so scary. A couple of years ago our then 9-year-old daughter fell off her bike and ruptured her spleen. I drove her to our nearest hospital, which is an hour away, where we attended A&E. We spent 6 hours at the local hospital whilst they assessed what was wrong, and this included pain relief, sonogram and a CT scan. Once they found the ruptured spleen, we were transferred by air ambulance to the Royal Children's Hospital in Melbourne, which would have been a 4.5 hours drive, where she stayed for 6 days seeing the best children's surgeons, etc. And how much did that cost us, you ask? Nothing, aside from the $80 per year fee to be in Ambulance Victoria. And RCH Melbourne is literally one of the leading kids' hospitals in the world. Absolutely. And I would happily pay more taxes to make it happen. Everyone deserves the opportunity of early diagnoses. Everyone deserves medication to heal. Everyone deserves a quality life. I didn't get glasses until I was 26 because I was afraid of the cost. I still have my wisdom teeth that flare up sometimes and cause pain. I want to contribute so people aren't financially ruined for being in an accident. You hear something enough, and you start to believe it. A combination of Facebook memes, YouTube videos, talk radio and podcasts, and right-wing news, as well as a grossly underfunded education system that in many places is discouraged from teaching critical thinking, means you end up with a bunch of people who never hear anything good about universal healthcare, and therefore support a system that costs them more money for their insurance, which doesn't cover the full cost anyway, and then pads out the costs further. But the villain of the piece isn't universal healthcare, it's socialism. Many people don't want universal healthcare because they have been so thoroughly conditioned on the idea that socialism is bad and will lead to the wrong people getting help they previously did not at their expense, that they would rather pay through the nose for coverage and treatment than lower their costs if it means that the wrong people don't get treated. The idea that America will pass universal healthcare and immediately have cost savings like the UK and Europe is a fantasy. It will take a while for savings to emerge, and they may never be as dramatic as comparisons to other countries. Now don't get me wrong, we should definitely do it, both as a human rights issue and as a cost savings issue. But it may never lower costs, just keep prices from going up as much. Dear God, yes. Just let my taxes take care of it, and cut out the blood-sucking health insurance middleman. They add nothing to our society. They have allowed the American healthcare system to explode the price of services and medications, because the consumer doesn't pay the real price as long as they have insurance. In turn, insurance premiums have exploded. Everyone involved makes billions off of the sick people who need care, and prioritize any way they can avoid actually providing that care or insuring it. I'm already paying for my insurance, so just use that money. Plus, employers who cover it wouldn't need to pay those premiums, and could pay workers more. I really challenge anyone to tell me why I shouldn't want one. I broke my shoulder while pregnant a few years ago, and the cost for the visit was $4K out of pocket and was $7K total before insurance paid, but my max out of pocket was $4K, so I had to pay that. Best part, they didn't do much. I got an X-ray, an arm sling, ultrasound and was monitored overnight due to being pregnant and falling. Oh, and on top of that, my insurance coverage cost $800 a month. Yay for living the US. Jesus. My dad had a stroke almost 5 years ago now, when he was driving in a ruralish town. He was in the small hospital overnight, airlifted to the large city hospital, then after a few weeks of care they're taken by ambulance, ferry, ambulance back home to a third hospital. Then the weeks of rehabilitative care and eventually longer-term care in another facility, and I think the only thing my mom paid for was the ambulance ride. Thankful for being Canadian. As a Brit, this widespread repulsion towards the very idea of universal healthcare totally baffles me. I so often hear screams of socialism or communism just from hearing discussions about the possibility of implementing it. I'm sorry, but if all you need for something to meet the definition of socialist or communist is for it to be provided by the government and paid for out of general taxation, then why isn't the US military socialism and communism, ? Or the police force? Or the fire service? In the UK, we have both public and private healthcare. There's a national health service which is free at the point of use for all, available to all, and paid for out of general taxation. This means everyone in the UK is guaranteed healthcare, regardless of their socio-economic situation at any given time. We also have private healthcare, for those who want it are able to pay extra for it, which gives them the potential for faster access to care, or a choice of their own specialist, private GP, etc. Depending of course entirely on what level of cover they take out. These things are far from perfect. The NHS is a constant political ping-pong ball here in the UK and is always one of, if not the biggest topics come election time. But the idea of not having healthcare, free at the point of need and available to everyone? Unthinkable, to me. Two main reasons for my understanding living here. 1. There's a self-sufficiency culture that's fostered by politics and geography. It's easy to see paying more money in taxes for anything you wouldn't see return on as a waste of money. A 2+ HR drive to see a specialist or even a GP is really common for a lot of people. 2. We don't trust how it would be implemented. Our government is viewed as corrupt who openly take bribes in exchange for government contracts. A universal healthcare system would either be slow, clunky, and or privatized. There's also a strong chance that the money paid in taxes would get found and spent elsewhere, like with Social Security. It's an insurance plan that's been well funded and around for a long time, and it's always on the verge of being nixed because they don't have the money they spent instead of investing. BTW, I'm 100% for universal healthcare, but I think we need to fix how politicians fundraise for campaigns here first. I like your comment a lot. I see a need to change the current healthcare status quo. I absolutely fall into the number 2 excuse you listed, mostly because I have been in a VA hospital, healthcare service provided by and implemented by the US government, and it is appalling. Twice as many clerks as medical staff. Doctors have to fill out tons of paperwork, so always look urgent and harassed. And the constant horror stories I hear about referrals where someone drops the baton. So what did you want to see me for? Sorry, they never sent me your enzyme panel. Yes, I know it took 6 months to get this appointment, but I can't do anything for you if I don't have your test results. I have zero confidence that the US Gov could implement universal healthcare. If the Gov could fix the VA so that it actually functioned, then I would gladly support universal healthcare. BTW, my dad worked at a free clinic for many years. It was privately owned and operated but depended on grants, and many of those grants came from the federal Gov. So would it be possible to have privately owned healthcare systems that operated with government payouts? My experiences with Medicare Medicaid suggest that even that would be really difficult. Awesome feedback. I can, to a degree, go along with those who are against it for fear of the government fucking it up and it being a total con job. I would still ask them how they propose people with no income but in need of healthcare are cared for, etc. My continued bemusement, as I say, is with those for whom the very idea of universal healthcare is ideologically toxic, in and of itself, independent or irrespective of any further conversation around the specifics of how it might be implemented in the real world. Given the current lay of the land, to them, it's bad because it's socialism. I mean, please, SMH. As far as I understand, the push against socialism comes from the Cold War era, McCarthyism and the Red Scare. It's a really interesting bit of American history that I don't think people realize took as deep of a seat as it did. You were basically persecuted for anything appearing to be communist, which got tangled up with the rhetoric about socialism because both are principled on the idea the government spends money on services for you. Our education system supported that mindset. I said the Pledge of Allegiance every morning in school. It also tied up the idea of being a patriot with religion to rally support of the Christian communities. Our discourse still strongly reflects all of it. Brace yourself. The real reason a lot of these people going on about socialism, communism, are opposed to universal health care is, well, unmentionable in polite society. The complaints about socialism are not in good faith. Many of them, they don't actually care about that. What they actually care about is their tax money not being spent on the wrong sort of person. And by wrong sort, of course, I mean people of color. There is a huge and ghastly history of social programs in the US in the 20th century, our end of it even, being actively sabotaged because they would benefit Black people, Native Americans, Latinos, Asian Americans, whomever the local white population hates. For instance, welfare queen is a dog whistle invented by Reagan in the 1980s to denigrate having social assistance for food for the hungry. The implication for those in the know, because it referred to a specific famous cause of welfare fraud, was that welfare queens were Black women defrauding welfare by, well, existing as both poor and Black. The unspoken, but in certain quarters very clear, implication was that welfare was bad because Black people would get it, and that is why welfare needed to be reformed into non-existence. For instance, the only way the U.S. passed the law establishing Social Security was by conceding to Southern racist interests by excluding classes of workers that were predominantly Black. The really virulent foam-up-the-mouth objectors to universal health care in the U.S. are the really sincere white supremacists. They're not going to come out and say that's what's going on. They're just going to make goofy-sounding arguments about other things to justify their opposition. But you can pretty much count on it that when someone's arguments against universal health insurance sound literally insane and are very passionately held, you're talking to a Nazi. Human resources rep here, and I say absolutely. Every month I have to give benefits meetings and help employees coming from other companies or unemployment make decisions on insurance, as well as those moving on to go somewhere else, and help them all make potentially life-changing decisions on insurance which they really don't even understand the basics. PPOVHMO, FSAVHSA, deductible, coinsurance, copay, out-of-pocket maximum. The glazed eyes I see. It reminds me of how my college allowed credit card companies to sign up 18-year-old kids who knew nothing about finances or credit back in the 90s, early 2000s. American healthcare is a machine that takes money from literally everyone in the U.S., launders it through a bunch of companies that all take a cut, and deposits the remainder in the bank accounts of a small subset of the population, executives and people who own stock. And before you say, everyone owns stock, BC retirement plans, no. They do not. Children don't, teenagers don't, poor people don't, illegal immigrants don't, a lot of self-employed and gig workers don't, and people who don't understand the stock market don't. But they all go to frickin' Walgreens and urgent care. It's a wealth transfer. People act like it's this crazy luxury to be able to go to the doctors. Everyone should be able to go. That's a basic human right. Where I live, I couldn't afford health care for my child for years. Should never not be able to take my kid to the doctors. You should never not be able to see a dentist. You should never avoid a major problem because you can't afford to get it checked out. Would it be easy to achieve? No. Impossible? No. I don't understand the people who buck free healthcare so bad. Like, what do you have against people going to the doctors? It's not you who needs to be taxed more for it. It's the rich who don't get taxed at all who should pay their dues.